When my daughter got married, I kept a $120 million investment portfolio completely hidden from her. My late wife, a pioneer in pharmaceutical research, left the fortune to me, and I swore to never speak a word of it to anyone. It turned out to be the most vital decision of my entire 72 years on this earth, because exactly 10 days after I walked her down the aisle, her new husband showed up uninvited at my front gate with a ruthless real estate attorney in tow. What they demanded, and the horrifying truth I eventually uncovered, completely shattered my reality. But they made one catastrophic miscalculation. They assumed my quiet demeanor meant I was weak. If you have ever been pushed to the edge by someone who thought they could walk all over you, tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe, because the way this story ends will leave you speechless. My name is Thomas Sterling. I am 72 years old, a retired structural architect. For the past 3 decades, I have lived a peaceful, solitary life in a sprawling, hand-restored Victorian home nestled in the misty hills of upstate New York. This house is my masterpiece. Every vaulted ceiling, every stained glass window, and every reinforced load-bearing beam was a labor of love shared with my late wife, Clara. When she passed away, she left behind a staggering fortune from her medical patents, $120 million, securely shielded in a blind trust that only I commanded. But I never touched a single cent of it for my personal life. I continue to live on my modest architectural pension, driving a vintage Ford pickup and maintaining the illusion of a comfortable but strictly middle-class retiree. I wanted my daughter Eleanor to forge her own path, to understand the weight and reward of honest ambition. It was a crisp Thursday morning, barely a week and a half after I had worn a tuxedo and tearfully given Eleanor away to Julian, an aggressive, fast-talking investment banker. The autumn air was sharp, carrying the scent of fallen pine needles. I was in my conservatory, meticulously restoring the brass hinges of an antique 1920s drafting table. The precise, methodical scrape of my sanding block was the only sound in the quiet house. I wore my heavy reading glasses, my fingers coated in a fine layer of sawdust, completely immersed in the simple, honest work of preservation. Then, the tranquility was violently interrupted by the heavy crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. I looked through the arched conservatory windows. A sleek, matte black Range Rover had pulled aggressively up to my front steps, blocking my old Ford. The engine died, and the passenger door swung open. Out stepped Julian, my new son-in-law. He was wearing a sharply tailored charcoal suit, his hair slicked back, projecting an aura of arrogant impatience. He didn't look like a man dropping by to share photos from the honeymoon. His jaw was set, his eyes cold and calculating. From the driver's side emerged a man I did not recognize. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing an expensive pinstripe suit and clutching a sleek carbon fiber briefcase. He carried himself with the predatory, gliding walk of a high-end corporate litigator. I wiped the sawdust from my hands onto a canvas rag and stepped out onto the wraparound porch, the heavy mahogany floorboards solid beneath my boots. I offered a tentative, polite smile, assuming there was some legal triviality regarding their new marriage license that required my signature. "Julian!" I called out, my breath pluming slightly in the morning chill. "This is unexpected. Where is Eleanor?" Julian did not return my smile. He stopped at the base of the porch stairs, crossing his arms over his chest, establishing a stark physical barrier between us. He didn't offer a word of greeting. Instead, he gave a curt nod to the man beside him. The stranger ascended the steps. He didn't bother to extend his hand. He simply snapped open his carbon fiber briefcase, extracted a heavy, bound legal folder, and slapped it down onto the wrought iron table next to my porch swing. The sharp crack of the heavy paper hitting the metal echoed loudly in the quiet hills. "Mr. Sterling," the man said, his voice flat, practiced, and entirely devoid of human warmth. "My name is Marcus Vance. I am the senior partner representing the holding company that has just acquired this estate. Consider this your formal notice of eviction." I narrowed my eyes, utterly bewildered. I looked from the heavy folder to Marcus and then down to Julian. "Acquired the estate? What nonsense are you talking about? I have owned this Victorian for 30 years. The deed is entirely in my name, and the mortgage was cleared before you were out of law school." Marcus adjusted his expensive cuffs, looking at me with a blend of extreme boredom and clinical pity. "That is no longer the case, sir. The title has been legally transferred, and the asset is scheduled for immediate liquidation. You have exactly 48 hours to pack your personal effects and vacate. If you are still on these premises by noon on Saturday, state troopers will be dispatched to forcefully remove you for criminal trespassing." The words seemed to hang suspended in the freezing air. 48 hours, vacate, criminal trespassing. A low, dull ringing started in my ears. My mind, trained to process complex structural loads and architectural physics, simply rejected the absurd data this stranger was feeding me. I looked at Julian. He was staring at his phone, swiping through his screen as if the destruction of his father-in-law's life was nothing more than a minor administrative delay. "Julian," I said, my voice dropping to a gravelly, dangerous baseline. "What is this? Where is my daughter?" Julian finally pocketed his phone and looked up at me. He let out a long, theatrical sigh, the kind you give to a misbehaving pet. "Eleanor is at the loft, Thomas. She couldn't stomach being here for this. It breaks her heart, but the house is sold. Marcus is just executing the paperwork. You need to stop arguing and start putting your clothes in garbage bags." My hands were balling into fists, the adrenaline flooding my system. I reached out and grabbed the legal folder. I ripped it open. Inside was a mountain of legal jargon: property transfers, quitclaim deeds, accelerated eviction mandates. I flipped frantically to the final signature page, my heart hammering against my ribs. At the bottom of the page was a blue state notary stamp. Beside it was a medical power of attorney, granting unconditional legal authority to liquidate all assets in my name due to severe cognitive decline. And right on the signature line was my name, Thomas Sterling. It was a flawless replica. The heavy downward stroke of the T, the deliberate spacing between the first and last name, the slight architectural block lettering style I used for all my official blueprints. It was perfect, except for one massive, horrifying reality. I had never touched that piece of paper in my life. I stared at the ink. The truth hit me with the devastating force of a wrecking ball. This was not a clerical error. This was not a banking glitch. This was a premeditated, highly sophisticated, and felonious forgery. And there was only one person on Earth who had unfettered access to my private study, my old architectural contracts, and my filing cabinets to trace that signature so immaculately. My own daughter, Eleanor. Marcus tapped the face of his Rolex. "I suggest you start calling storage facilities, Mr. Sterling. The developers want to begin bulldozing the East Wing by Monday. I'll leave my card. Do not attempt to contact my client. Any further correspondence will go through my firm." He dropped a matte black business card onto the table. Julian turned around without another word, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel as he walked back to the Range Rover. Marcus followed. The engine roared, and the heavy vehicle aggressively backed out of my gates, tearing down the mountain road and disappearing into the autumn mist. I stood alone on my porch. The New York cold was biting at my face, but a different kind of ice was spreading through my veins. My own daughter and her husband of 10 days had just ambushed me. They had forged federal real estate documents. They had stolen the masterpiece I built for my wife. They were tossing me out into the cold, completely convinced I was a defenseless, aging pensioner with a failing mind who would simply roll over and accept defeat. I looked back down at the forged ink. A profound, terrifying calm washed over my mind. The shock instantly evaporated, replaced by the cold, analytical precision of a man who had spent 40 years diagnosing catastrophic structural failures. They thought my gray hair meant I was oblivious. They had absolutely no idea about the $120 million Leviathan they had just disturbed. I closed the folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked back inside the house. I had a phone call to make. I locked the heavy front doors, sealing out the bitter cold. The house was dead silent, save for the hum of the antique radiators. Decades of architectural engineering had hardwired my brain to approach disasters without emotion. When a skyscraper's foundation cracks, you don't weep over the concrete. You isolate the stress point. You calculate the exact mechanism of the failure. My failure, it appeared, was the blind, unconditional love I had given to my only child. I walked into my grand study, my boots echoing on the hardwood. I threw the legal folder onto my massive oak desk and sat down. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my coffee mug against the wall. I needed to meticulously dissect their lie. I pulled the medical power of attorney from the stack and spread it flat under the harsh glare of my desk lamp. The document claimed I was suffering from severe, rapidly advancing Alzheimer's. The sheer audacity of the gaslighting was breathtaking. To legally justify this forgery, they needed a documented medical narrative. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and let my mind rewind over the past month. I searched for the microscopic stress fractures in their behavior. Then, I found it. The brake incident. It had happened exactly 2 weeks ago, just days before the wedding. Julian had generously offered to rotate the tires on my vintage Ford pickup, claiming he wanted to bond with his future father-in-law over some manual labor. I had let him use my garage while I went inside to prepare lunch. An hour later, I drove the truck down the steep hill toward town to pick up supplies. Halfway down the descent, the brakes completely failed. The pedal went straight to the floorboard. I had to violently swerve into a muddy embankment, nearly rolling the vehicle, just to stop from plunging into the ravine. Eleanor and Julian had rushed to the scene. Eleanor had cried hysterically, clutching my shoulders, screaming at the local sheriff that my mind was failing, that I had completely forgotten to fill the brake fluid, that I was becoming a severe danger to myself and others. She had forced me to go to the local clinic for a cognitive evaluation. I had been so shaken by the near-death experience that I actually believed I had made a senile, fatal mistake in my maintenance. Sitting in my study, the truth crystallized into a razor-sharp edge. It wasn't an accident. Julian had intentionally bled my brake lines. He had actively orchestrated a potentially lethal car crash just to lay the groundwork for this fake Alzheimer's narrative. He had risked my life to build a paper trail of incompetence. The realization was so sickeningly dark that it stripped away every last ounce of paternal warmth I possessed. I picked up the landline phone on my desk and dialed Eleanor's number. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to gauge the exact depth of her betrayal. She answered on the second ring. "Dad?" Her tone was soft, dripping with a sickeningly sweet, counterfeit sorrow. "Eleanor," I said, forcing my vocal cords to tremble, perfectly mimicking the sound of a terrified, broken old man. "Julian was just here. He brought a lawyer. They told me I have to leave the house in 2 days. Eleanor, please, what is happening?" I heard a heavy, theatrical sigh through the receiver. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I couldn't bear to be there, but you know we had to do this. Dr. Evans said your Alzheimer's is accelerating. You almost killed yourself in the truck last week. You can't live alone anymore. We sold the house to pay for a specialized care facility." "I didn't agree to sell the house, Ellie," I whimpered, letting a sob catch in my throat. "Someone forged my name. Julian forged it." "Dad, stop," she interrupted, her voice shifting into a patronizing, scolding tone. "Nobody forged anything. You signed those papers in front of a notary last month. You just don't remember. That's the disease talking. Please, don't make this harder than it is. Just pack your bags. The transport service will pick you up on Saturday." She hung up. I slowly placed the receiver back on the cradle. She had doubled down. She was willing to gaslight me into an asylum. I picked up the forged document again and pulled a brass magnifying glass from my drawer. I didn't look at the signature this time. I looked at the notary seal at the bottom left. The stamp belonged to a state notary in Manhattan. But what caught my eye was the date typed next to the seal, October 12th. I stared at that date, a cold, predatory smile spreading across my face. Julian was a slick finance bro, but he was incredibly sloppy with administrative details. He had picked a random Tuesday from the previous month to backdate the paperwork. I stood up, walked to my bookshelf, and pulled down my leather-bound travel journal. I flipped to October 12th. On that exact date, I was not in New York. I was not even in the country. I was 10 days into a deeply immersive, strictly silent architectural retreat at a remote monastery high in the Swiss Alps. I had been completely off the grid, without a cell phone, surrounded by 30 monks and a dozen international architects. I had the passport stamps. I had the flight manifests. I had a dozen highly respected witnesses who could testify under oath that I was 4,000 miles away on the exact day this document claimed I was sitting in a Manhattan law office, signing away my estate. Their entire legal foundation was built on a provable, catastrophic lie. But if they were brazen enough to commit massive federal real estate fraud, what else had they compromised? I immediately booted up my desktop computer and logged into my local credit union account. This was the decoy account I used to maintain my middle-class facade. It held my modest architectural pension and some basic savings, exactly $60,000. It was the only money Eleanor knew about. The screen loaded. My available balance read $0. I clicked the transaction history. Just 24 hours ago, a domestic wire transfer had drained all $60,000, routing it to an offshore holding company. The memo line read, "Specialized Care Trust Deposit." They had stolen my life savings and disguised the theft as a medical payment. But the logic didn't add up. Why would Julian, a supposedly high-flying investment banker who drove a $100,000 Range Rover and lived in a glass-walled Manhattan loft, risk 20 years in federal prison to steal $60,000 from a pensioner? You don't commit aggressive, highly traceable felonies for pocket change unless you are drowning. They weren't greedy, they were desperate. It was time to unleash the Leviathan. I walked over to the grand fireplace, reached inside the dark, soot-stained brickwork, and pressed a hidden latch. A small compartment popped open. Inside was a heavy, shock-proof case containing a military-grade satellite phone. I powered it on, the screen casting a harsh white glow in the dim study, and dialed a number routed through Geneva. "Mr. Sterling," a crisp, heavily accented voice answered immediately. It was Elias Thorne, my Swiss wealth manager. Elias was a brilliant, utterly ruthless financial predator who managed my $120 million portfolio. He was a man who moved global markets before he had his morning espresso. "Elias," I said, my voice dropping back to its natural, authoritative command. "I need a ghost audit initiated immediately. Target, Julian Vance, my new son-in-law, and my daughter, Eleanor. I want your forensic team to rip their financial lives apart. I want every crypto ledger, every hidden offshore account, every line of credit, and every tax return from the last 5 years." "Is there a specific anomaly we are looking for, Thomas?" Elias asked, all pleasantries instantly vanishing. "They are broke, Elias. They just committed federal wire fraud to steal $60,000 from my decoy pension account, and they forged a deed to illegally liquidate my estate. They are terrified of something, and I need to know exactly what kind of monster is chasing them. You have 48 hours until their eviction deadline, Elias noted. I will have the entire dossier delivered to your encrypted server by midnight tonight. Do you require private security? No, I replied smoothly. I require ammunition. Find out who holds their debt. I terminated the call. The financial hounds were loose, but while Elias waged war in the digital realm, I needed a physical listening post inside their fortress. I needed to hear their panic. I went to my basement workshop and opened a locked metal cabinet. During my career, I specialized in the acoustic architecture of concert halls. To test sound bleed, I used microscopic, highly sensitive audio transmitters. I pulled 2 of them from a velvet case, each no larger than a shirt button, capable of broadcasting crystal clear audio to a receiver for a week. I slipped the transmitters into my pocket. Then, I found an old cardboard box and carefully packed Clara's vintage collection of porcelain botanical journals inside. I picked up my phone and dialed Eleanor again, forcing my vocal cords to shake. "Ellie?" I whimpered when she answered. "I'm packing like you said, but I found your mother's botanical porcelain. The care facility won't let me keep them. Can I please bring them to your loft, just to keep them safe?" A long, irritated sigh echoed through the phone. "Fine, Dad. Just drop them off quickly. Julian is on a massive conference call and we are very stressed." I drove the 2 hours down into the city, maintaining the slow, hunched posture of a defeated man. I parked outside their ultra-modern, glass-walled loft in Tribeca. When Eleanor opened the door, she looked at me with thinly veiled disgust. She didn't offer to help me with the heavy box. "Just put it by the media console," she snapped, her eyes glued to her ringing smartwatch. I shuffled inside, purposely dragging my feet. As I passed her massive, Italian leather sectional sofa, I feigned a stumble. I dropped the box. It hit the marble floor with a loud crash, the porcelain clattering safely inside the padding. "Oh, for God's sake, Dad, watch what you're doing!" Eleanor shrieked, throwing her hands up. "I'm sorry, my hands are just shaking," I mumbled, dropping to my knees. Eleanor's phone rang loudly. She groaned in frustration and turned her back, walking toward the kitchen to take the call. In a fraction of a second, the frail old man vanished. I reached into my pocket, peeled the adhesive backing off the first micro-transmitter, and pressed it firmly against the underside of the heavy leather sofa's wooden frame. I grabbed the second transmitter, slid on my stomach, and attached it behind the massive marble base of Julian's open-concept office desk. I slowly stood up, brushing off my knees just as Eleanor returned. "Leave the box. Just go home and pack, Dad," she commanded. I nodded submissively and walked out the door. The Trojan horse was deployed. I drove back to my Victorian home, arriving just as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long, dark shadows across the property. I went straight to my study, booted up my encrypted receiver, and plugged in my noise-canceling headphones. At exactly midnight, my satellite phone chimed. Elias had delivered the financial dossier. I opened the files on my monitor. The screen bled red with catastrophic debt. Julian was not an investment banker. He was a degenerate gambler disguised in a bespoke suit. His highly leveraged cryptocurrency hedge fund had completely imploded 6 months ago. He had desperately taken out massive, high-interest loans to cover his margin calls, but he hadn't gone to a legitimate bank. He had borrowed from a brutal, Brooklyn-based Eastern European syndicate. I opened the threat assessment file. Julian and Eleanor were holding $4 million in violent, unregulated debt. The syndicate had given them an absolute ultimatum. Produce a $1.5 million goodwill payment in exactly 7 days, or men with baseball bats and blowtorches would visit their Tribeca loft. That was the catalyst for my eviction. They were ruthlessly sacrificing my life to save their kneecaps. I placed the headphones over my ears and tuned into the frequency broadcasting from their loft. The audio was pristine. I could hear the clinking of a glass, followed by the heavy, frantic pacing of Julian's expensive shoes on the marble floor. "It's not enough, Eleanor." Julian's voice cracked, bordering on hysterical. "The house equity will clear the $1.5 million payment on Monday, and your father's pension covers the lawyer fees. But what about the remaining $2.5 million? The Russians aren't going to just walk away. They want the principal. Stop pacing and drink your gin," Eleanor's voice snapped back, colder and more venomous than I had ever heard it. "I already solved the problem." "Solved it? How?" Julian demanded. "The lawyer gave him 48 hours. The movers are coming on Saturday. Where exactly did you tell the transport van to take him?" I held my breath, gripping the edge of my oak desk. "I didn't book a specialized care facility, Julian," Eleanor said, her voice dropping into a sociopathic deadpan. "I booked a private, off-the-grid hospice compound deep in the Louisiana bayou. I paid the administrator in untraceable crypto. There are no state regulators. There are no doctors on staff. They cater to wealthy families who need their burdens to permanently disappear." My blood ran ice cold. "A hospice?" Julian stammered, raw horror finally bleeding into his voice. Eleanor, if someone investigates, if they trace the transport, they drug those patients into comas, you're talking about a black site. Nobody is going to investigate, Eleanor replied smoothly, completely unfazed. They will heavily sedate him upon arrival. Given his age, the chemical stress will induce a fatal cardiac event within 3 weeks. It's guaranteed. You want to murder your own father? Julian whispered. I want to collect the $8 million high-risk life insurance policy I secretly took out on him 3 months ago, using the forged medical records, Eleanor corrected him, the greed vibrating in her voice. Once his heart stops, the facility issues a quiet death certificate. The policy pays out, we wipe out the Russians completely, and we walk away with $4 million in pure profit. It's a flawless corporate bailout. I pulled the headphones off, letting them fall onto the desk. The profound, agonizing heartbreak of losing my daughter was instantly incinerated by a raging inferno of absolute hatred. She had priced my life at $8 million. She was sending me to a swamp to be chemically executed, treating my murder like a brilliant stock trade. I picked up the satellite phone and called Elias. He answered on the first ring. Elias, pivot the entire team, I commanded, my voice echoing with the terrifying calm of an executioner. I don't care about their crypto losses. Contact the Brooklyn syndicate holding their $4 million paper. Thomas, those men are extremely dangerous, Elias warned. I am vastly more dangerous, I replied. Use the trust's liquid capital. I want you to authorize a hostile buyout of Julian's entire debt portfolio. Pay the syndicate their $4 million in cash immediately. Legally assign all promissory notes and leverage to a shell corporation that I exclusively control. Elias paused for a fraction of a second, the brilliant cruelty of the move dawning on him. You want to own their debt. I want to be the monster hiding under their bed, I said. Have the digital contracts finalized by dawn. It will be done, Elias promised. I spent the next 24 hours meticulously setting the stage. I dragged half a dozen cardboard boxes into my grand foyer, taping them up to look like the pathetic compliance of a defeated old man. I waited as the clock ticked down to their 48-hour deadline. By Friday night, Elias confirmed the transaction. The Russian syndicate had happily taken my cash and signed over every shred of Julian's debt. I was now their sole, absolute creditor. Saturday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky. At exactly 11:45 a.m., the grinding roar of a commercial moving truck echoed up the mountain. It parked by my gates. Right behind it, Julian's black Range Rover pulled into the driveway, followed by Marcus Vance's sleek sedan. I stood in my master bedroom and looked in the mirror. I shed the flannel and denim I had worn for years. I put on a bespoke navy blue three-piece suit woven from vicuña wool. I strapped a $50,000 Patek Philippe watch to my wrist. The frail pensioner was dead. I walked down the grand staircase to the foyer. Elias Thorne had arrived an hour earlier through the service entrance, accompanied by 2 massive stone-faced men wearing dark suits with FBI badges clipped to their belts. They stood in the shadows of the hallway, invisible from the front door. At precisely noon, a key scraped in the lock. The heavy front doors swung open. Julian marched in first, projecting artificial bravado. Eleanor followed, wearing oversized sunglasses and a designer coat, looking around the foyer with extreme distaste. Marcus Vance strutted in last, clutching his carbon fiber briefcase. All right, Thomas, Julian barked, looking at the taped cardboard boxes. The transport van is waiting at the bottom of the hill. It's time to go. Don't make a scene. He rounded the corner and stopped dead in his tracks. I was sitting in my high-backed leather armchair in the center of the grand parlor, legs crossed, sipping a glass of 30-year-old scotch. My bespoke suit caught the ambient light. I didn't look broken. I looked like a king sitting on a throne. Marcus pushed past Julian, oblivious to the atmosphere shift. Mr. Sterling, the 48 hours have expired. As per the deed transfer... You can put the forged paperwork away, Marcus, I interrupted, my voice booming through the vaulted ceilings with terrifying authority. Unless you want these 2 federal agents to add it to your indictment. I snapped my fingers. The 2 towering FBI agents stepped out of the shadows, the sheer physical weight of their presence sucking the air out of the room. Elias Thorne stepped forward to stand beside my chair, a silver tablet in his hand. Marcus froze, his arrogant sneer dissolving into pure, unadulterated terror as he stared at the federal badges. His carbon fiber briefcase slipped from his sweaty grip, crashing onto the hardwood floor. Julian staggered backward, physically bumping into Eleanor. Eleanor pulled off her sunglasses, her eyes wide, frantically trying to process the immaculate, powerful executive sitting in her father's chair. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is going on? Who are these people?" "These people," I said, taking a slow sip of my scotch, "are the architects of your destruction. Let's begin with you, Marcus." I pulled a manila envelope from my jacket and tossed it onto the coffee table. Inside that folder are certified flight manifests and passport stamps, proving I was isolated in a Swiss monastery on the exact date you supposedly notarized my signature on a medical power of attorney. You committed massive federal wire fraud and elder abuse. You're looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Marcus's knees visibly buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, hyperventilating, holding his hands out toward the agents. "Please," he shrieked, instantly abandoning his clients. "I didn't know the full extent. I'll give you everything. I have their text messages. I have the emails. Just give me immunity." I looked at the weeping lawyer with supreme disgust. "Take him outside," I ordered the agents. One of the massive men hauled Marcus to his feet by his collar and dragged the sobbing attorney out the front door. I turned my gaze entirely to Julian and Eleanor. They were plastered against the wall, shaking like leaves in a hurricane. I picked up my smartphone and connected it to the parlor's premium acoustic sound system. I pressed play. Instantly, Eleanor's own sociopathic voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "I booked a private, off-the-grid hospice compound deep in the Louisiana bayou. They will heavily sedate him. It will induce a fatal cardiac event within 3 weeks." Julian let out a choked gasp, clapping his hands over his ears. Eleanor's face turned the color of wet ash. She sank to her knees, her designer coat pooling around her on the floor. "You thought you were brilliant," I said, my voice cold and sharp as shattered glass. "You planned to chemically execute me to collect an $8 million insurance policy, all to pay off a $4 million gambling debt to a Russian syndicate." Julian's head snapped up, his eyes bulging. How do you know about the Russians?" I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket, projecting an aura of untouchable wealth. "Because you made a fatal miscalculation. You assumed I was a poor pensioner. You had no idea that I am the sole director of a $120 million trust fund. I have resources that would break your mind." I walked slowly across the parlor, stopping inches from my trembling son-in-law. "Yesterday morning," I whispered, "I instructed Elias here to contact your syndicate. I used a fraction of my wealth to buy your debt in cash. They legally signed over all of your promissory notes to me." I pulled the heavy legal contracts from my inside pocket and dropped them at Julian's feet. "You don't owe the Russians any more, Julian," I said, smiling a terrible, merciless smile. "You owe me. The loan is in default. I am initiating immediate, catastrophic asset seizure. I am taking your Tribeca loft. I am taking your Range Rover. You are entirely, completely bankrupt." Eleanor let out a primal, hysterical scream. She crawled across the hardwood floor, grabbing the hem of my trousers, her tears staining the expensive wool. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, looking up at me with wild, desperate eyes. "I'm sorry. I was just terrified. The syndicate was going to kill us. Please, I'm your little girl. You can't send me to prison. Forgive me." I looked down at the weeping woman clutching my legs. For a fleeting second, I remembered a little girl running through this very parlor, laughing as I chased her. But that girl was a ghost. The creature at my feet was a parasite who had priced my murder at $8 million. I reached down, grabbed her wrists with uncompromising strength, and peeled her hands off my suit. I shoved her backward. "You stopped being my daughter the exact second you booked my one-way ticket to a Louisiana swamp," I stated, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I nodded to the remaining FBI agent. He stepped forward, grabbing Julian by his expensive lapels and slamming him against the wall, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. He did the same to a hysterically screaming Eleanor, her cries echoing through the house she had tried to steal. I didn't stay to watch them read the Miranda rights. I turned my back, walked out my front doors, and stepped into the crisp autumn air. A chauffeur was holding the door to a sleek, armored Mercedes Maybach. I slid into the leather interior, Elias sliding in beside me. I looked out the tinted window one last time as the federal agents dragged my former family out in chains. I felt absolutely nothing but the profound, liberating weight of a foundation built on truth. Sometimes, the people who share your blood are the ones holding the knife to your back. The hardest lesson a parent can learn is that unconditional love should never mean unconditional surrender. If they treat your life like a transaction, you must become the auditor that bankrupts their soul. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever survived a devastating betrayal from your own family? Tell me how you fought back in the comments below. Stay strong and never let them underestimate you.